yourself hydrated. Hey number ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking, and today we are back with a new episode of my series Weapon Blank versus Armor Blank. If you're new to this channel and you like knights, samurai, romance, weapons and armor, become a noble one. Subscribe to my channel for more content from the Metatron. Okay, on this episode we're talking about this idea. What about an hypothetical duel between a samurai fully armed and a Roman fully armed? How easily would samurai weapons be able to deal with Roman armor? Now, in one of the previous episodes, someone said, yeah, but you shouldn't really talk about just weapons and armor, you should consider battle, formation, war, tactics, strategy, many other factors. But the thing is that I've already done this. If you're interested in the idea of what about the entirety of a Roman army, or maybe even the Roman Empire as a whole, facing the, for example, Iron Age Japanese and their armies and weapons and armor and tactics, geographical situation as well, like an actual invasion, then check out my video, Roman Army versus Japanese Warriors, I think I called it, I don't even remember, but you'll find a card here that you can't click because YouTube changed that. You'll find a link in the description below. But this video series is actually focused on one-on-one duels, equal skill of both combatants, so let's say both are veterans. How would the armor and weapon fare? The thing is though that in Rome there wasn't much access to high quality steel. Generally speaking, Roman armor was made of several different metals. We have the plates, for example, of a segmentata would be either made of iron or very low carbon steel, and the same would be for lorica hamata, so the rings would most likely be iron. Iron is significantly softer than heat treated medium carbon steel of the late Middle Ages. For example, let's have a look at the Roman Imperial Gallic helmet that I have. My replica is made of mild steel, but originally many, as I said, would have been iron. So in this case I'm showing you this little cube down here that is actually pure iron, and it kind of represents the actual metal that this helmet would be made of. But of course, some helmets would be made of copper alloy, particularly depending on what era we're looking at. For example, we would have brass helmets. Now, this is a Montefortino, and some of these helmets were used all the way up to the 1st century, so even in imperial times, and in this case it's made of brass. Some helmets would have been made of bronze. Now, I don't own any bronze helmet yet, but I do have bronze scales, so I can kind of show you the metal. And of course I've got the cube because I collect cubes of several different kinds of metals because they are awesome. But these are the three sort of metals that, regardless of what armor your opponent, being Roman, was wearing, samurai weapons would have to encounter and try to deal with. Now, given, it goes without saying that you don't want to hit armor. You want to try and bypass armor. You want to try and exploit the weak spots of armor, but you can't always do it. And remember, you're fighting a professional. Roman soldier will be a pro. And some people in the comments have said, yeah, but they will be good at fighting information. They wouldn't be good in one-on-one, but I strongly disagree with that. Yes, the Roman soldiers would give their best information, but I think there will still be a formidable foe, a formidable opponent to fight even on one-on-one. So let's say that you're a samurai and you're trying to cut my throat or hit my face, or perhaps even cut me somewhere where I don't have armor, but as a Roman soldier I anticipate that, and your blow, whether it be from a katana, whether it be from a naginata, yari and whatnot, ends up hitting my armor. What would happen? But for example, in the case of my lorica segmentata, yes, originals would have been made of iron, sometimes sandwiched between a carburized surface and a softer inside. But you also have other sections. For example, the hinges are made of brass. And in my replica, the little hoops that you use to fasten the segments are actually made of pure copper. Pure copper being the softest of all the metals I've mentioned so far. Clearly, if a blow hits a steel plate, or perhaps overlapping steel plates, overlapping iron plates, it would be easier for the armor to protect you. But if a full-on blow were to hit a hinge, it would have to deal with a less strong metal. So why did the Romans do that? For example, if someone were to hit me in the section of my lorica segmentata that is actually pure copper, most likely that hinge would break. Why did they do that? Generally speaking, speaking, remember that when you build armor, and that's actually a principle that still works today, most of the time working with percentages. You cannot cover everything. You can't make everything as protective as humanly possible, because a soldier still needs to be able to function. Therefore, you generally speaking work with center of mass. Statistically, there is a much higher chance that you hit me on one of my plates rather than the exact little spot where I've got my copper hook. And the fact that they chose copper alloy for those sections meant that if it did break, it would be a lot easier to replace. I actually managed to get to this point without touching my chin strap. I'm amazed. With the arquebus, the situation is different. The matchlock brings a whole new level of combat, and even though I did say on the Samurai vs. Knight video that I don't think arquebus ball from a Tanegashima Teppo could penetrate high quality steel armor from a knight, I can't really be that confident about Roman armor. I think it would penetrate most likely. If you are at a reasonable distance and you fire on a Roman with an arquebus and you hit him, most likely I think it will go through. And just for your entertainment, let me show you a little animation of a modern soldier shooting a Roman soldier. For fun. Katana. Well, some of you noticed the significant dent on my brass Montefortino helmet. Well, that's actually because once I actually tried hitting my helmet with my katana, and I have got the footage because I made a mini clip for my Patreons. Let's see what happens when you hit a brass helmet with a 1095 high carbon steel katana. Alright, as you could see, I didn't go particularly strong. I went sort of medium strength, probably that was like 40%. And yet that made a significant dent into the metal. Now, before continuing with this though, I do need to make a massive caveat. My katana is actually exceptionally good steel compared to the sort of steel that Samurai had access to. So again, this is high carbon steel 1095. This is exceptionally hard. Absolutely beautiful if you ask me. But the sort of steel that the Samurai would have would probably still deal some significant damage to both bronze and brass armor. But what about iron? Well, I haven't been able to test it and I would love to do it. Perhaps I'll do it in the future, maybe as a collaboration with Matt Easton, since lately he has been smashing Roman stuff for fun. But in my opinion, a katana or a nodachi, so bladed Japanese weapons, they would most likely manage to dent both lorica segmentata and lorica musculata, but they wouldn't penetrate. Of course, if you manage to hit your opponent 5, 6, 7 times, then the armor might actually become unserviceable, in the sense that if you managed to put 2 plates out of position, that could create a gap that then you could try and exploit. But what about something like a kanabo? Well, again, as you know, that's the anti-armor weapon, and it worked against samurai armor. Most likely it would work against Roman armor. The Romans also did not wear a lot of padding underneath their armor. The Romans did wear some padding underneath their armor, but not much. And unfortunately we don't know much about it because of course we're talking about organic material. But we do know that they had something that now modern day Roman reenactors call subarmalis, but most likely at the time was called thoracomagus. In my opinion though, rather than actual padding, it was more for comfort. Something that perhaps you would have a bit more padded shoulders for people wearing segmentata, but you don't have to imagine something that significantly helped with reducing impact damage, maybe up to a certain extent, but not a lot of padding. Definitely not something like we see in modern day Buchot, for example, or Battle of the Nations. And that's even too much considering from a medieval perspective, because for example 13th century knights most likely didn't wear any padding at all underneath the mail. 15th century, of course, there will be a certain degree of padding because it is important to cushion some of the impact force, but still we wouldn't have to imagine that the Romans had a lot of padding underneath their armor. That's why, in my opinion, a cannonball would be a very effective weapon, particularly against Romans in mail, because again, you don't have to imagine them having a lot of padding underneath. Something like a segmentata, maybe I could take a full cannonball blow to my shoulders, but probably not on my head, meaning that, yeah, you wouldn't crack my skull, but you would still put me out of action most likely. Yari and naginata, again, they're very good weapons, but still remember that the Romans have got a massive shield, which is not easy to go through. But if you do manage to place a good hit, I think a naginata would work better against a Roman than it would against a knight, because as you can see, Romans have got a nice, juicy, meaty target here that if you are a very precise fighter, you could exploit. Again, you have to bypass the shield, but let's say that you manage to do that. I think a proper cut with a naginata down on the neck of a Roman would be an excellent score. But remember also that my friend Matt Easton often points out the fact that the backplate here is obviously to protect you during a very close quarter combat situation with large skuta, and he's absolutely right with that, because of course once you try and bypass someone in front of you who has got a massive shield, many of your attacks will end up hitting the back of the neck of your opponent, and so you've got a neck protector. But another thing that I think sometimes a neck protector happened to do was the fact that if someone is trying to hit me really strongly towards my head, one of my instinctive natural reactions to that, I might end up doing this, and if I do, the neck blade sort of might protect me if you were coming here, which is interesting. It's a similar situation with the Yari, but of course with the Yari you would probably try and stab me in the face. Again, a matter of skill, but it would be easier to kill a Roman with a Yari than it would be to kill a knight with a Yari, because most knightly helmets were, of course, fully protective here, and it would be almost impossible to exploit them with a Yari. Even if a knight is fighting wiser up, it still is a smaller surface, usually smaller opening, and even if you're fighting a knight who is in sort of light cavalry equipment and he's got an open helmet, for example this one, the Italian barbute, you still have a lot less to work with than you would if you were to attack a Roman. Okay, but these are my opinions on Japanese weapons versus Roman armor. Of course, I didn't cover all Japanese weapons, I've only covered the most famous ones. But if you do like this sort of video, let me know and I might make even more in detail videos, perhaps even a full video dedicated to each single weapon, and perhaps even exploring less known weapons of both the Japanese perspective, Roman perspective, so classical period and medieval period in Europe. Well, as always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please remember thumbs up, and if you're not yet members of this community, become a noble one. Subscribe to my channel for more content from the Metatron, and remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Walete!